The Ferry Building on the Embarcadero, San Francisco, California, November 17th, 2009. Amy Goodman is going to be giving a talk on media and the healthcare debate at Book Passage at the back of the Ferry Building near where the Marin ferries load passengers. Book Passage Bookstore, November 17th, 2009, San Francisco, California. Amy Goodman speaking on the healthcare debate and the nature of corporate media and who they are representing and advocating for. Bay Bridge. Okay, November 17th, 2009, going into the back of the Ferry Building, see Amy Goodman giving a talk on the economy, okay, there's the ferry taking off from the dock, heading over, probably that one looks like it's going to Napa, up in Sonoma County, near Sonoma County. Alright, here's Book Passage. Alright, let's head into Book Passage. Here is Book Passage.
Media that love them. Please, a warm hand for him. I forgot to mention that if you buy 2 copies of the book, you get the free DVD of the 1-hour interview of Amy with Bill Moyers. So that's available for you at the counter.
Thank you, Ron. Well, it's a great honor to be with you, and I'm very glad we got here on time. We left about 5 minutes ago from, I think it was half an hour away. But when we hailed a cab, my colleague Brenda Murad in the back there, we were lucky enough when we got in, it said green cab. I don't know if it really was like environmentally green, but he said, Democracy Now! I'll get you wherever you have to go in 5 minutes. So thank God for the really pervasiveness of independent media in this city. It's really rare, and I hope you don't take it for granted, and you support your public radio or television station. Whether it's the wonderful KPFA, which is celebrating 60 years right now, absolutely incredible legacy, incredible history. Born in 1949, a war resistor named Lou Hill came out of the detention camps and said, there's got to be a media outlet that is not run by corporations that profit from war, but run by journalists and artists. And that's how Pacifica was born. Not run by corporations as George Gerbner, founder of the cultural environment movement. He was the dean of the Annenberg School of Communications at the University of Pennsylvania, said, not run by corporations that have nothing to tell and everything to sell that are raising our children today. And so Pacifica was born, the first station KPFA here in the Bay Area. The next station in 1959, KPFK in Los Angeles. In 1960, my station in New York, WBAI. 1977, WPFW in Washington. And the fourth of the 5 stations, KPFT, went on the air in 1970 in Houston, Texas. It's the only radio station in the country whose transmitter was blown up. That's right, it went on the air in 1970. It's about to celebrate 40 years now. And as soon as they erected that transmitter, the Ku Klux Klan strapped dynamite to the base of it and blew it to smithereens. The silver lining was they didn't have money to pay for advertising to let people know they were going on air, so this certainly blew it into the consciousness of the potential listening audience of Houston. And when they got back on their feet and rebuilt that transmitter and started again, the clan blew it up again. Now, I can't remember if it was the Exalted Cyclops or the Grand Dragon. I often confuse their titles. But he said it was his proudest act. And I think that's because he understood how dangerous Pacifica is, how dangerous independent media is. Dangerous because it allows people to speak for themselves. And when you hear someone speaking from their own experience, whether it is a Palestinian child or an Israeli mother, whether it is an Iraqi aunt or an Afghan uncle, it breaks down barriers, borders, stereotypes, caricatures that fuel these hate groups. We need a media in this country that builds bridges between communities rather than advocating the bombing of bridges. That's why independent media is so important, and I hope you support KPFA as well as your public access station here. Access San Francisco, very much under threat, as other access stations are around the country. The history of public access is important. Media activists realized as cable companies came into a town, and only one got the monopoly, whether it's Cablevision or Comcast or Time Warner, to dig up the roads, lay the cable. And media activists said, if you're going to get a monopoly, you've got to give back some stations to the community. And so that's how they grew all over this country. You have Access San Francisco, and already the cable companies, the telecoms are vying to do away with public access. Only you can fight for it to be here. I think of Marin, an amazing story. A group of people wanted to get Democracy Now! On. And they called us and said, well, how can we get you on? We said, well, we're already on PBS here, KRCB, you can tune in at midnight. But in Marin County, just go to your public access station. They said, no, we don't have a public. No, we said, you have to have a public access station. No, they said, we don't have a public access station. So they started to dig deep, and they looked at the city charter and the contracts, and they realized that, in fact, the contract had been signed for a community media center. The cable company had to pay for it, but no one had activated it. And so they got their cable company to build a $3 million community media facility, and now it is thriving. Yes, you can put the me in media. You can make media your own. And it's so important as newspapers are shuttered around the country, as they close one by one. Newspapers like the Rocky Mountain News, well, almost hit 150 years. They survived the Depression. They survived the floods. They could not survive this economic downturn. As newspapers shutter, what we will lose most are those local voices. And that's so important because I think activism begins at home. When you're concerned about something in your own community, you want to hold someone in power accountable. But when the newspapers close, those local papers, those local media outlets, it is of grave concern because that's where we all start. I remember working on my high school newspaper. At the time it was learning to hold our principal accountable. Then you just go on to a larger stage. But it all starts here. So you've got public radio, public television, public access, Pacifica Radio. Just make sure that it not only survives, but it thrives, and that's up to you. Independent media, how important it is when you look at all the different issues, what we face today, from global warring to global warming, to the global economic meltdown, to the lack of health care in this country. We need a media that's not brought to us by the weapons manufacturers, not brought to us by the insurance industry, not brought to us by big pharma, the drug companies, but brought to you by listeners and viewers like you. Why? Well, let's look at the health care debate, and let's look at how the media has covered health care and war. The group FAIR, Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, in the lead up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, looked at the 2 weeks around Colin Powell, then Secretary of State, giving his push for war at the United Nations. It was February 5th, 2003. Remember, 5 weeks before the invasion. He later called that push for war a stain on his career. He made the case for weapons of mass destruction. He pushed for war. Interestingly, in the first column in Breaking the Sound Barrier, The Art of War and Deception, we talk about those moments at the United Nations. And this is also about the power of art. You know, there is a tapestry that hangs in front of the UN Security Council. It's a replica of Pablo Picasso's famous anti-war painting, Guernica, you know, from the Spanish